Joining us now to debate that question, Kirsten Kukowski, Deputy Communications Director and National Press Secretary for the Republican National Committee, and Ben Wickler, progressive strategist and host of The Good Fight. Ben and Kirsten, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to be on with you, JD.
Yes, indeed. So, Ben, if we're to take the president at his word that he knew about some of these scandals, specifically with the VA, before they hit the news, there are serious implications, are there not?
Well, JD, I think both of us heard read the president's remarks, and the key word there is usually. Usually he knows. I think what he's referring to there is things like Republican efforts to block access to birth control, to block comprehensive immigration reform, to block student debt reform, and to rebrand itself to be less repellent to young people, people of color, and women. Kirsten, how is that going?
I'm laughing. I'm laughing about your comments, but I'm also laughing at the fact that the president continues to try and have it both ways. Either he finds out about these scandals that everyone in America believes that he should know about because he's the commander-in-chief and because he should have a very good grasp of what's going on in his own government. But then now we're supposed to think, or we're supposed to believe that he actually doesn't read the news. I think it's a bunch of baloney. I think that it's laughable that he's trying to have it both ways, to tell you the honest truth.
Kirsten, our president made another interesting claim at this fundraiser, saying, and I quote, "I will say for all the Democrats around here, I'm not overly partisan." Kirsten, is this a pot, meat, kettle moment for the president yet again?
Well, yes. We just put out a video, actually. I just pressed send and an email to everybody, a video called Fundraiser in Chief. This is one of the most partisan political presidents we've ever had. He is most comfortable when he's on the stump, when he's campaigning. And so that's just laughable. It's ridiculous. Everyone's on to him. He should give it up and start focusing on things that this country needs to start focusing on. And frankly, it isn't helping the candidates that are out there running in the midterms. And that was kind of the point of my last email that I just sent, which was asking the question, is all of this fundraising while the president is getting bad reviews for fundraising while there's all these crises around the world and there's natural disasters happening on the West Coast, is all of this partisan rhetoric that we're hearing from the president, are his coattails really helping these Democrats running in red states in the midterm elections? I don't think so, and I think it's going to make for a very interesting 100 days as we round out this midterm election cycle.
Ben, Daniel Henninger, the Wall Street Journal, has penned a scathing editorial headlined, "Obama to World Drop Dead." He calls the president our most provincial chief executive in at least half a century, criticizing him for all these fundraisers. Henninger writes, in part, the progressive Democrats who displaced the Clinton machine in 2008 and came to power with Mr. Obama have no interest beyond consolidating political and electoral power inside the U.S. Not even the White House of Lyndon Johnson, the ultimate poll, was so purely politicized. And Ben, to think of it, it was Lyndon Johnson who called Richard Nixon, quote, a chronic campaigner. Certainly we understand the importance of raising money, but does this ever become harmful to the president and the Democrats, all this fundraising?
Well, let's consider the messenger here. The same columnist in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia. He said that John McCain had gotten a lucky break for reasons that are lost to history, and he didn't say a word about President Bush. It appears that he thought that clearing brush in Texas was a totally legitimate foreign policy, and somehow that President Obama's actions are telling the world to drop dead. President Obama has a few balls to juggle. One of them is to deal with world affairs. Another is to try to advance his domestic agenda. And it turns out that Republicans have one goal, which is stopping anything from happening on the minimum wage, shutting down the government to stop people from getting health insurance. 20 million do now. And in the face of that, the president could either just give up, or he could try to elect a Congress that's willing to do the work that the American people elected him to do. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, we understand that fundraising is a part of electioneering and bringing the case to the people. Kirsten, Mr. Henninger continues to criticize the president's fundraising. In the column we've cited, he writes, the fundraising is a frantic effort to protect this new Democratic voter machine. The world doesn't vote, so the world doesn't matter, unless, of course, the American people in November decide that a world defined by events like Flight 17 does matter. Are international affairs, or this shooting down of the plane in the Ukraine, is that going to be one of the major issues in this midterm?
I think it's definitely part of it. I think that it speaks to an overall viewpoint that this president doesn't really have control over anything that he is supposedly supposed to have control over, whether it be world affairs, whether it be government mismanagement here in the States, domestically. I just think that overall we're seeing it in the poll numbers, to be honest with you. We're seeing that Americans don't trust him. It doesn't matter if it's domestic or abroad. And this is the president who campaigned in 2007, 2008 of changing the world view of our presidency and of our country. And I think that now it's hard to listen to my colleague over there on the Democratic side trying to talk about trying to distance himself from that, and distance the president from that, and attack columnists and attack the press and attack Republicans. That's all we're hearing from the Democrats right now, and it's frankly really sad.
Obviously, whomever holds the presidency, regardless of their party label, the office is a magnet for criticism, and there has been some criticism of the president's response to what happened in the Ukraine. Let's compare the reaction of world leaders and their comments to the downing of the airliner. Ben, I want you to listen to these comments, and we'll look for your response after we hear them all. We begin with the Prime Minister of Australia.
After the crime comes the cover-up. What we have seen is evidence tampering on an industrial scale, and obviously that has to stop.
There is also anger. There is anger that this could happen at all. There is anger that the murder of innocent men, women and children has been compounded by sickening reports of looting of victims' possessions and interference with the evidence. And there is rightly anger that a conflict that could have been curtailed by Moscow has instead been fomented by Moscow.
As we reflect on the immeasurable loss suffered by these families around the world, we are not only outraged at the attack itself, we are horrified and enraged by what has happened since, by the clear intention of some to obstruct an investigation into how the passenger and crew died.
Now's the time for President Putin and Russia to pivot away from the strategy that they've been taking and get serious about trying to resolve hostilities within Ukraine in a way that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and respects the right of the Ukrainian people to make their own decisions about their own lives.
About a minute and a half remains. Ben, let's go to you for your response, comparing and contrasting those different responses from world leaders. Should our president have been tougher?
Look, all of us look at the crash with horror, and it's incredibly painful to see what happened and all these lives lost. And the president, in the comments you just played, wasn't talking about his emotions. He was talking about what Russia needs to do. I think the number one thing here is to bring peace to this crisis, and that's where I want the president of the United States to be focused. I think his, expressing of outrage actually isn't necessarily the thing that moves the chessboard forward on that. And if we can stop future accidents like this happening, then the path that gets us there is the right one.
Kirsten, about 30 seconds for you, ma'am.
Sure, real quick. I would agree that the president's expression of outrage is not moving anything forward, and I think that is why his activity over the last couple of days is really problematic. Pictures of him getting into limos after fundraisers in LA and San Francisco on the West Coast, going to the home of the producer of Scandal. Great show, love to watch it. But frankly, that is sending the wrong message to Russia, and it is sending the wrong message to everyone across the world that really wants this to be resolved.
Well, we'll have to leave it right there. Kirsten and Ben, we thank you very much for your comments. We'd love to hear from you at home. Why don't you tweet us your